Hey, everybody, welcome to the Particle Accelerator Podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow their business and accelerate their team. I'm here with Matt Hudson. Matt, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. So, my name is Matt Hudson. I am the CEO and founder of Startup to Scale. Essentially, I work with companies, startups, small businesses that are looking to scale beyond CEO-led selling. So, once they reach a certain point where growth is beyond what they can handle, that's where I would come in, working with them on people, process, tools, building the structure out for a sales organization.
Oh, wow, that's super handy. We might have to talk a little more. I'm intrigued. Um,
That's it.
I am intrigued as a founder seller at the moment. I'm very intrigued. This will be awesome. Well, moving into some of the more, we talk a lot about innovation and tech trends on this podcast. What tech trends significantly impacted your industry, and how has your company responded?
So it's probably, I would say it's probably data. From an impact perspective, I started out in telco years and years ago, and didn't really know, I guess, the impact that data had even back then, before I transitioned into software. But I think watching people transform their business from, more of I guess, a human driven approach where you had much more hands on, you had everything was on prem. So things started to progress when transformation into the cloud started to happen. And I think that was probably the biggest impact is understanding one, what was capable or what capabilities were out there, but then two, getting them to a certain comfort level where it was okay and they were willing to release that into the cloud. But I think it certainly has changed. AI probably would, well, it would not be where it's at today without the transformation, I guess, into the cloud. And so I would say it's probably that.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. We're finding with our clients that uh, the vision for data, like these little breadcrumbs, that if you collect them and bring them all together, they create all this immense value. And we're finding that the CEOs who've done that over the past 10 years are in hugely different situations. I don't even know if hugely is a word, but vastly different situations than people who kind of let the data go by or didn't understand its underlying value. Knowing the things that might have attributed to a customer becoming a customer, and then be
Mhm.
able to look at those trends over years to identify the best way to find customers and convert them is huge. What are some other technology innovations that you're betting on to drive your business growth?
So, I think automation is going to be part of that, of course, because you've got an efficiency gain um, that's out there. And I think that comes in different forms. You've got sales, engagement platforms that your sellers can use. You've got um, observability solutions that will allow you to, I think we've got one going right now as far as notes on a call to be able to make sure that, you capture everything that a customer is talking about and can go back to it and reference. Um, so different tools, insight into customers' buying patterns and where they're at within the buying cycle. Any any and all of those tools, I think, that's something that even the tools that we're using today won't be probably here within the next year. So we'll have a new set, but it continues to evolve to allow us to have more insight into the customer's behaviors. And again, I think you have to make sure that you mirror that with the human side of things and leverage the data for sure. Um, but yeah, I would say tools, automation, insight, data, that type of stuff.
Yeah, so let's I think we can go one layer deeper because you and I have an understanding of the sales pipeline. So we're using our CRM, we're collecting the data in there, we're trying to enrich that as much as possible. So the more we know about our prospect, the better we are. But then we get them on the phone and we have a needs analysis call. We identify some goals. We're having real conversations. I always find it very difficult as a salesperson to do personalized follow up. Like,
Mhm.
and AI seems to be something that we could leverage in that space, but I'm still apprehensive. And it feels like my Read AI and or Otter or whatever it is you're using for your note taking and the CRM are still disconnected. And I'm so eager to connect those two things so that I have the email writing, the personalized message writing. Have you seen anything happen there in that intersection between the last call and the follow-up email?
Not that I've seen. No, I mean, I think I'm in the same boat as you. I think having a technology that could bridge that would be great. I think we're still a little ways off from having AI be something that we can rely on necessarily. I think it's a good guide for sure, but
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree. I think I'm looking for just a workflow enhancement there,
yeah,
something that automatically gives me access to the last transcript, kind of a Read AI HubSpot integration, which I think I could figure that out on my own. And that's kind of my next step.
yeah,
And then sure, if that would temporarily be a really cool tool for some people.
yeah,
But it also seems like we'll see some natural convergence in the same way our phone is converged with a camera and storage and compute. We should probably see some of these tools start to converge between the digital AI note taker and then well, what are you going to do with those transcripts?
yeah. I could see it rolling into a CRM for sure. And again, people don't want to buy 14 different tools to run a business. They would prefer to have one tool that does it all. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it'll end up consolidating into one or two systems. Maybe it's a CRM plus a, insight tool like a Zoom Info or something. But I think you'll certainly see consolidation. What it looks like, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But
Right, right. Well, what are some of the most significant gaps between your ambitions and the realities of today?
so I think for me, let's see. So gaps, I think I see companies that'll go through what they feel is a challenge. We'll take, for example, growth within for my business. Um, their first thought is to go out, let's hire a bunch of salespeople, let's bring it in so we can grow the business. And I think if people would stop and kind of evaluate long enough before making a knee-jerk reaction, I think it would save a lot of headache and a lot of people's part, parts. I think the challenge is, I mean, I'm an owner, you're an owner, so it's not bad, but CEOs are not necessarily the best salespeople. They're not necessarily always the best designer of a sales team. They're thought leaders. They come up with great ideas, and that's how they've become who they are. I think being able to acknowledge that is sometimes difficult, but if they can, then I think that opens the door to allow for somebody that has done it, that does have the expertise, that can partner with them, and it takes it offloads that work from them, and allows somebody else to kind of carry the burden while they go out and do more thought leadership and whatnot.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, so what do you think the biggest challenge is for you to maintain your competitive edge in your industry?
There's a ton of competition in this business, and over the last year, it's gotten even more. And I think everybody wants to have a business until it's time to actually get to work, and then it's sometimes it's not. they don't necessarily deliver. I think the competitive advantage is knowing that it goes back to what my first comment about the perfectionism, knowing that I'm going to come in and I'm not going to leave until I know they're set up for success and scaling and growth. Um, you won't get that everywhere. And you're not going to get necessarily somebody that can do starting from marketing through sales, through, implementation and so on. So I think the competitive advantage is the fact that I'm on for the long haul, just like they are. Right. So if
Mm-hmm.
they don't succeed, then I don't. Um, and that's not necessarily something that there's a lot of quick win businesses out there. They want to come in and they want to, train on the sales methodology, or they want to, look at revamping a BDR role, but not really focus on the overall vision. And I think that's what people need, especially in the small business and startup space.
Yeah, I would definitely say you and I are similar in that there are a few software development companies out there in the world where we're both in competitive spaces. We've
Mhm.
kind of found similar that our culture and our level of ownership is the key differentiator for us. Just the ability to kind of share in the goal, and um, we've kind of modeled our culture off of special operations culture. So we're there until the mission's done. First on the ground, last to leave. That kind of culture, which is which has its challenges. It is, but we say that pressure is a gift.
Mhm.
If you weren't being pressured to deliver, that would mean you were unnecessary.
Yep.
So the pressure is a gift, and so we love being in situations where our work and that our output is important, our outcomes are valued. And so with that's always going to come the pressure to fully own and fully deliver.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if you're independable in that, then people are going to keep coming back for more.
Yeah, if you're not comfortable, or if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not learning, nor are you getting better. So you've got to put yourself in rooms where it's not necessarily the most comfortable spot for you to be in as far as knowledge. You got to kind of stick your neck out there a little bit. Um,
Sure.
so
Well, so how do you approach risk when you're implementing something new?
I think research on the front end as much as you can, but again, death by research can happen too. So I think you give it its due diligence, understand what whatever the solution or tool or whatnot, whatever impact it can have, but then you you've got to take the leap and know that something's going to come up. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you try to prevent it. Um, I think I mean, whether it be an implementation, hiring a new salesperson. I mean, anything you do, there are going to be challenges, and being okay with it not being okay, I think is going to be key, or I think it is key. So,
Totally. Well, I'm always curious when I talk to other CEOs about how do you plan? How do you do your connect your roadmap with your overall business strategy? How do you run your plan?
mine's a little unique because I'm still actually I'm kind of doing double duty. So I've also got a corporate job. So my business planning is split two ways. One with the corporate job, and then one with the business. But as far as planning is concerned, um, I mean, I would say that when I initially started out with this, it's something that I wanted to do for a long time. It's something I enjoy doing as far as building out teams. But up until I would say 10 years ago, I had not put together a full sales team. I had hired, sellers, but I worked for AT&T. So they were a huge corporation that you didn't really need to build anything for them. So my first opportunity was when I went into data management space. And I think I learned quickly that you can get too deep quick too quick, and get lost in it. So I think keeping yourself grounded by having kind of your standard SOPs of what your business looks like and what next steps should be, and then constantly kind of validating or double checking that you're still on point or on task, I think is key. Um, but again, you've got to be willing and able to adjust as things come up. So it's just a matter of time management and making sure that your plan is being worked like you've got it designed and you're not deviating too much.
Yeah, really good. And so do you usually use like an annual planning cycle, or tell me a little bit about it, or and you feel free to answer the question in terms of how you want to set up your new company.
Yeah.
Um, I'm
Uh,
always curious as how people like to kind of go from, do you have you used OKRs before? Is there something you like or don't like about that? Because most of my audience is CEOs, and I think they appreciate hearing how different people approach strategy.
yeah, I mean, so I think OKR is the right direction to go from a structure perspective because you've got everybody's involvement. You've got everybody contributing to the same vision, the same goal, um, versus a top down. I, I I think culture is going to be probably your biggest driver in success as a business anyway. You mentioned it earlier as far as what the culture you built. I think that can tank a company quick or it could make it successful. So you don't necessarily need to hire for, I'm going to say skills not important, but you need to look for the culture and build the culture right. And that, to me, that's the basis. But I guess uh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that, honestly.
Yeah, so I've seen what I have seen happening as a trend is people used to do kind of an annual planning. So they'd say,
Mhm.
hey, this is where I want to be at the end of the year. This would especially happened a lot in sales,
Yeah.
where oh, I have this revenue target, and then they'd back into, okay, well, how many leads do I need? Um, and so I feel like sales probably did this a little before the rest of the company.
Hmm.
But what I'm finding really helpful, at least for the people I advise, is um, and EOS has really kind of pioneered this, where they really talk about a quarter being the most important unit of management and strategy. And so kind of the common recommendation is to hold a quarterly planning session,
Mhm.
like take a whole offsite day
Yep.
once a quarter. And so I'm finding this interesting as I learn about these different strategies of time compression and how important it is, like how you can just kind of tie the Parkinson's law, which is that work expands to fill the space,
Hmm.
is many companies are falling into that pattern where it's like, okay, well, it's only Q1. I can kind of be unintentional about my hitting my goals. And then Q2 happens, you're like, okay, well, now we didn't quite do what we had. If you divide our goal by a quarter, well, we're kind of a little bit behind.
Right.
And so then Q2, maybe there's an increase in intention, but you still feel like you have plenty of time. And then inevitably, long story short, you get into Q4 and you're scrambling like crazy to try to get there, and risking not hitting the goal.
Yeah. I think
So
doing it quarterly too lets you be a little bit more nimble as far as adjusting on, plans, making a yearly commitment, um, especially in today's time. I mean, it's hard to do, it's hard to project out necessarily on the year, but I think if you do it quarterly, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to adjust on the fly. Um, for a down quarter, if you have, a bad Q1, then I think it, to your point, you don't get to brush that under the rug. You got to figure out how to fix it Q2, not Q4. So,
totally. Yep, totally. Um, cool. What have you seen in corporate America? You can obviously tell I'm super curious about this topic. What did you see in corporate America? Did you see more the scenario of will plan a year and just scramble? Or have you ever experienced in corporate America something that was being done properly by quarter?
The closest I would say is I worked at a startup that had, I mean, we had OKRs and whatnot, but the CEO kind of understood, and we were in an industry where you had to be able to be flexible. So I would say, as far as in general, no, corporate is they still plan on a year. Whatever tools they use to be able to measure, I don't I don't think that they're as focused on quarterly success, um, or even monthly success. I mean, you could break it down to even a smaller scale, to be able to really drive it home. But I think right now in corporate, you're still seeing the yearly planning session where, it's February, March, maybe April before you kind of get the plan for the following year. So you got 3 months that's already kind of wasted because you've been waiting on the new yearly plan. And I think you just set yourself up to, I mean, you set yourself up for a bad Q1, and then you're scrambling the whole year to try to make it up.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally. Well, what lessons have you learned from an initiative, just an initiative that failed to deliver expected value?
so I made some changes at, I, I revamped a team that was a little bit larger as far as volume. I had roughly 40 some odd people, and we were going to scale it. Um, and we ended up, we did scale it to 50, 55 or something like that. But I made a decision to split. It was a BDR organization, so I made the decision to split it into kind of a hybrid specialist model. Um, and in looking back, what ended up happening is you had very few people that wanted to be hunters in sales, which is not necessarily uncommon. A lot of salespeople don't like to hunt for business, but it almost it it hurt us from a management perspective because we had basically a team of 55 that wanted to be farmers, but they got stuck in a hunter role. Um, I think you can have a blended model, with the right characteristics of people, that can do both. But in looking back, I mean, we had to switch it. We had to go back to a blended model, after about 6 months because it just wasn't the outbound team is what we called them. They weren't producing. So, and this was back when the volume game was still something that you could do. I mean, obviously now that's completely different. You can't do outreach like you could 5 years ago and expect to sell. It just times are different. But back then, even, the volume game, I mean, you've got to have people that are the right, have the right mentality, for sales. I think sales has become a little bit different, um, altogether, right? So I think salespeople now are sometimes more service related as opposed to actually hunters. Um, how you get back to that, I don't know, because you've got the industry, or I mean, we're all kind of accustomed to pushing salespeople away because, you know, we all get 40, 50 messages a day trying to get sold to. So we created this for ourselves. But I think, I mean, ultimately you got to have the capability to do both in order to be successful. And I think that coaching process, I mean, it can be taught. I think anything can be taught with the exception of attitude, I think. So,
Mm-hmm. So, going back to that lesson learned, the lesson was that uh, can you crystallize that for me? Like, was that the outsourced team and the inbound team were two separate?
yeah. So we separated them. I ended up hiring two new managers that handled the outbound. And I guess a couple of things. When we initiated it, we didn't have everything's set up. So exactly what I was talking about earlier with CEOs going out and hiring a bunch of people before they had everything planned. That I've done it, so I experienced it myself. So
Hmm.
we didn't have the tools in place for the outbound really to be successful. I mean, some of them were because that was just in their blood, but we didn't have, content creators, for example. I mean, when you start looking at sellers, yes, they can create their own emails, but to ask them to do, campaigns on their own, and you've got 50 some odd different people trying to write content, it's a nightmare to be able to try to manage from a governance perspective what's going out the door. So there should have been a lot more planning on the front end, and we probably would have found that it wasn't the best idea. I mean, research in the market would have told us it's been tried before and it wasn't successful at other companies. So it was a knee jerk reaction to a change in business requirements
Hmm.
that we were looking at, trying to figure out how we were going to. I mean, it was a significant uplift in quotas and what was expected. So
Yeah.
that was that was my initial knee jerk, and it was
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
planned.
definitely. Like I experienced that if you send out more emails and you make more calls, that does not equate to more leads in the SDR category. What I have found though is if you do some kind of value exchange, and I'm so glad you use the phrase content creation, and you partially, the way I interpreted you was you partially mean emails, but
Yes.
it seems like I experienced that you also have to create some kind of value add, like, hey, check out this. We give a lot of really cool free guides, free,
Mhm.
even if it's a case study, it's just like things that could deliver value to a prospect beyond just a hey, come have a call with me and let's figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the hesitation. I mean, as soon as you hear, hey, I'd love to sit down and walk you through what I do, you immediately want to, I mean, hold up. No, I'm not interested. I didn't ask for anything. So I think you're right. I mean, you've got to build a relation. It's a relationship sell. It's not brute force anymore. Can't be. So you've
Mm-hmm.
got to build credibility. You've got to obviously offer insights, whatever it may be. And a lot of times it may not even be about your company. You're sharing insights within the industry or things that you're hearing. Um, that tends to lower their guard and you gain some credibility. Like, look, I'm not trying to pitch slap you, is what they would refer to it as. It's just simply sharing information about what I'm hearing in the market. And then as you build the relationship, then I think it becomes a little bit easier to start down that path of talking about their needs specifically. So
Cool. Well, how do you cultivate a culture of innovation and fluency? Like, you mentioned a bunch of really cool cultural aspects like integrity. But as you build your organization, how do you intend to cultivate a culture that embraces change and performs well?
I think it's involvement of everybody on the team. I think everybody has to have a voice in order for it to work. Um, I've been in organizations where, you know, you knew your role and your role was what it was. You didn't get to have a voice. Um, I think you've got to build it to where everybody feels like they're pushing towards the same goal. The vision's there. Um, and I mean, you can create it in a lot of different ways. Committees where you're involving some of the front lines. To me, that should be common sense. I mean, they're the ones that are hearing directly from prospects and customers as far as what's needed. But I think a lot of times people get hung up in hierarchies and the way that structures are done within companies. And to me, it should be a flat hierarchy. I mean, there shouldn't be a level above. Yes, you're going to have titles, but everybody should be contributing to the same goal. Um, they each have their own portion of it that they would contribute to, but you've got to make sure that they feel comfortable being able to do that. And I've seen it both ways. I mean, I've seen people literally fear for their job that, if I say anything, I'm not going to have a job, which is not, to me, that's not the way you build a company, a
Hmm.
team, a company, whatever. So
Cool. Well, what advice would you give to somebody who's just beginning their transformation journey, or they're starting a company, or starting their career?
Um, Take your time and don't try to get there too fast. I think again, especially for somebody coming in new um, to the career, I think people see a higher level position as something that they want and they're going to drive to. And I honestly, a lot of times, or most of the time, even that's not necessarily what's best. So you take your best salesperson and you stick them in a leader position. Not a good idea, typically, because that's not their skill. Flip it. You take a leader and put them in a sales role. That doesn't always work. Their job and their, I guess, strength is in coaching people um, around process or around approach. So try not to get too excited too quick and expect to move too fast. I did it myself. So I wanted a management job within 6 months of having a job at AT&T. And I looking back, they should have not allowed it for one. Um, but I think for me, it was like I had something to prove and I had to get out there and show. And if you relax and take a second to look at what you're trying to accomplish, you got a lot of time um, to get there, and you're going to learn along the way. I think if you try to jump too fast, you lose a lot of the lessons that you learn by doing the job. Like that was probably
Yeah,
one of the biggest things when I ran the larger group that I was able to accomplish from a respect factor because they knew I did it. I mean, I did the job. I knew how bad it sucked from time to time. So and I didn't try to paint a picture like it wasn't. And I think people respect that. But if you jump too fast, you don't have an opportunity to go through that.
yeah. I'm developing some materials around the like capability versus capacity. And there was a famous framework that was brought up, was capability versus willingness. And I think as leaders, we've taken on um, this idea that it's the employee's fault because they're either not willing or not capable. And that was somewhat helpful, I guess. But I do think that it kind of gives the leader an out.
Of course it does.
And so by saying, okay, but maybe it's just that they don't have the capacity. And so capacity is something that I can help them with, that I can coach them through. So maybe they don't have the capacity because they need to be trained. They
Yep.
need to learn how to delegate their work, or they need to put together that SOP, or they need to talk to the tech guys about automating some things. But capacity is now this kind of mutual thing that the leader and the teammate can work through with together. And then on the personal note, we have this self-talk that says, well, maybe I'm not capable of this. So if we get into a situation, we use the wrong word on ourselves too. But well, okay, maybe I just need to figure out how to have more capacity. If I add to my capacity, if I become more efficient, then I can do. And I'm a firm believer that the biggest root cause of employee satisfaction is the imposter syndrome. um oh, I'm not. And at the root of that is this false belief that you're not capable. And when I think the more true statement is that you just haven't figured out the capacity for the things that you're being asked to do. So
Or you
definitely.
I mean, leadership as leaders, I think a lot of times we fail in setting somebody up for success from a training perspective, from um, a knowledge gap. I think it's easy to your point for a leader to say, well, it's the rep. Well, not necessarily. Have you spent the time that they deserve? Um, and instead of looking at it as, well, it's just the rep, we'll get another one. I mean, the investment's already been made, so why not make sure that you've given them every tool that you got to be successful? And I would say 90% of the time people cannot answer that as a yes. So I think it's an excuse. I think it's cop out, or it
Yeah.
can be. So
Yeah, for sure. But let us get to know you a little bit. The way I love to do that is I love to ask, what was your first job? For me, it was a paper route. I had a paper route when I was 13. But for you, how did you make your first dollar?
so I guess my first dollar would be, and it's somewhat probably not common, was actually in the oil field. So I'm from northeastern Oklahoma. So I've got some family that has oil wells, but we had a gentleman that had some land that was adjacent to ours, and he offered me, I can't remember what the amount of money was, but he said, come out and work for me. We'll pull, oil wells. It'll be great. It was not great. It was a lot of work. Um, but it was a good opportunity to kind of learn, I guess, work ethic, if you will. Um, so, I mean, I did that throughout the summers, honestly, from there through high school, I guess, until I finally got sick of smelling like oil when you walk in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandfather was a owned a bunch of oil leases out in Odessa, Texas area, like the West Texas Permian Basin area.
Yeah.
So I definitely know what a pump jack is. You got to go measure your water. There's
Hmm.
a lot of things you got to do, and um, I was a little too young to do any work out there. But I remember running around in the 110-degree Texas heat with a 22 rifle shooting rabbits
Okay.
and helping him go tend to his leases. And I had a lot of fun with that. I also learned about West Texas air conditioning, otherwise known as a white straw cowboy hat. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I imagine your experience was pretty uh, similar, but roughnecking is some hard work, man.
It is a difficult job. I don't envy those folks that have to do it daily. It's a tough job for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, cool. What toy or hobby that you had as a child inspired what you do career wise today?
Toy or hobby, man, that's a tough one. So most of my hobbies when I was younger was around, ironically, it does fit. So I rode motorcycles. My dad raced, so I was constantly on either bikes or he also had a body shop. So we worked on restoring and building cars. So I think the tie back is just a couple things. Perfectionism. My dad was certainly a perfectionist, and he was not okay with letting anything go out the door that wasn't pristine. And that's something that I've picked up from him, and I try to implement it within my business. Is I mean, time is obviously important, but I think making sure that you do the job the right way the first time, I think that's how you build the credibility and the relationships that you need in order to sustain in business. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Oftentimes uh, we give being detail oriented a bad name by calling it perfectionism, but somebody's got to pay attention to those details, right?
right.
Like we do need to get stuff right. So details matter. Um, but yeah, in within some sort of balance, I'm working on that myself.
It's a constant
Um,
battle.
for sure. Well, what was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Um, I was a math guy. I enjoyed, I guess it goes back to problem solving and kind of digging in to figure out how to approach a subject. Worst, I would say probably like French or Spanish. I took both and wasn't really crazy about either of them. Um, Only because I did think I would use it. Now I wish hindsight's 2020. I wish I would have spent more time in Spanish because I could have used it in South Texas. So, but I would say math was probably my strong suit. So,
Cool. Well, what quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
so golly, that's a good one too. I would say it's a Vince Lombardi quote. True test of a man's character is what he does when nobody's looking. So it's something that I've tried to emulate across no matter what I was doing job wise, but certainly when I came into a leadership capacity, that was one of the things that was important to me, is making sure that it, there's no reason to be fake. I mean, I am who I am. So making sure that I'm holding true to that values that I built myself on. And that's how I come across as leadership. So,
Yeah, love that. Yeah, integrity is essential, especially when there's nobody to manage you. You can only manage yourself, right?
yeah.
Your team can say, "Hey, I've needed this from you for a while," but you're the one making sure you're filling your hours with productivity. What do you think the greatest invention or discovery has been in the past 300 years?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm sure it's cliche, but it's probably going to have to be the internet, just because that's, to me, that's when technology, I don't want to say business took off, because you had the automobile industry, but that's when things really took off, when you started gathering data, and being able to use and leverage data, as a way to help customers. So I think there's certainly some advantages to it. There's also some people allow it to become more of a crutch. I think there's still a very severe need for human touch within any interaction. And I think some people rely a little bit too much on the internet side. But I mean, without it, you're not going to be able to be successful in business. So I would say I mean, it's tied to everything that we do. So,
Yeah, it's been so huge. A couple of things come up for me there. One is, and I wouldn't have been able to find this out without the internet, but one of the greatest inventions for me, at least within the past week, maybe not 300 years, is I watched my wife try to stir organic peanut butter without making a mess, and she was not very unsuccessful. Organic peanut butter, the oil floats to the top, and so
uh,
you have to reconstitute the peanut butter. And so I was one Google search away from finding a device that is, it's basically an alternative lid with a bent wire that goes down into the jar and a little crank. And so you just screw on this lid and you turn the crank a couple of times and the peanut butter is mixed. And so I got her that
wow.
for a little um, thoughtful gift, because otherwise she was sitting there with a big giant knife trying to stir the peanut butter.
Yeah,
Um,
you wouldn't have
so
been able to
yeah,
do it years ago for sure. Without the internet, you would have never found that. So,
I would have never found that. I wouldn't even thought of the better way that was people commonly finding. But I also feel that maybe in the same way we're now learning about all the mistakes that we've made during the industrial revolution, pollution, toxification, like our food is not very clean. Um, in much the same way we're kind of learning from those mistakes. I wonder if we're also learning the hard way from how we treat information as a society, right? We have all this power, but have we been responsible in much the same way? Like, we were able to mass produce food, but just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should.
yep, that's exactly what I was saying about leveraging the human element, and staying true to who we are as a people. I think some people, especially with AI, it's turned into a much more hands off, you know, allow it to do its thing. And that, to me, that's not how you sell. That's not how you interact with people. It's not how you build relationships. So I think you're right. We will end up at some point, if we're not already, learning the lesson that, it's still important to be part of the process, and being engaged as the human element side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost wonder if there's some kind of truth score or something out there that folks could vote on, different pieces of information, because we're just, I mean, it seems like there's two, depending on what side you are on the political aisle, you're watching a different movie altogether.
Hmm.
So it'd be interesting to see how that gets resolved. Well, cool, man. If people liked what you had to share today, how would you like them to connect with you?
So can connect with me on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm currently doing double duty. My website is startuptoscale.us, so they can connect with me there. Um, Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help and chat with anybody that has any questions.
All right, cool. Well, it's been great to have you on the show. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
No, I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.